Thank you. It's really an honor to be here. So, this is going to be a really interesting conversation because I think we're at this inflection point in history when AI is supposed to be taking everybody's jobs. And we have an amazing person here who's worked in so many different companies in the recruiting function. So, here we are. Stephen, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Thompson, and very happy to be here. I am part of Ormsby Capital, as well as I'm a consultant to many companies in the Valley. My background, a little bit, just to give you a quick synopsis, is I've worked at Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, LinkedIn, Nike, and so my work has really been scaling these organizations from their early foundations into their late foundations. So that's me.
Yeah, and about myself, I'm the managing partner of Progressive Ventures. We invest in seed stage B2B companies, primarily out of the top accelerator programs in Silicon Valley. We are on Fund One and doing a final close very soon. And in parallel, I do run a nonprofit organization. It's called Founders Creative. We have 40,000 founders, investors, and executives just in Silicon Valley. We run a pre seed accelerator through the nonprofit that feeds into the top accelerator programs. So we've have 37 companies we've launched through our accelerator program. So I guess we're a good mix of big company and startup craziness. So we'd love to hear your perspective on how AI is taking over people's jobs. Should we really be paranoid about that?
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's a great question. We are in the green room. We talked about this a lot. So I really think that when we talked originally, we talked about AI, and really the term that I like is really what's underneath AI. And as we saw, one of the speakers was talking about search. So in AI, there's search relevancy. There's a lot of things under AI. And so when we talk about it, we really need to break out certain areas and say what we can do and what we can't do. So for me, is AI coming for our jobs? I kind of think of it as a robotic arm, right? It's an aspect of helping us do more with our jobs, not necessarily taking our jobs. So I don't see it the same way, but I do understand the concern in the way things have been propelled in some of these companies, how they use AI when interviewing, when evaluating talent. So there is some negativity as well.
Yeah, but I think you'd also agree on the analogy with the Industrial Revolution, don't you think? Where the wheel was taking over bullock carts or, the horses. And so here we are in a similar age where AI is going to replace some things. Like if you actually use it to generate code, it's quite efficient. And there are many things in marketing technology products that can be automated, marketing function that can be automated, content generation is being automated, the SDR function is being automated, right? So there are many of these roles that are that can be automated to such an extent that you can lower the number of resources you need to hire. And so, what's your perspective when it comes to the cultural shift that needs to happen, both from the employer and the employee's perspective, when this sort of change comes about?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do think that companies have been excited to move very quickly with AI at just a crazy speed, but they haven't told, for instance, in recruiting, let's just take a recruiting example, they haven't told people that are applying for jobs that they're using AI. Right. So folks don't know that they're using it. They're kind of surprised when they do. But for instance, some folks use it for interviews, full on interviews without actually anyone meeting someone at the company. Well, that changes the way people engage with your company. People are like, well, I don't want to work for this company. I don't even know who's there. There's no one's giving me a hand touch. There's nothing going on for me personally. So I think it can be used negatively. But I also, to your point, we don't have buggies. We don't have people sitting in elevators punching things for us to go up. We don't have typewriters anymore. So there is an evolution that naturally happens, but it's the way that you incorporate that into your business, which is very, very important. And I think a lot of people are frustrated that are who are trying to get jobs, that they don't get any engagement with these companies. So it's really hard if you're a young person or if you're in career and changing jobs to apply for a job to be rejected based on something that you can't really see or tell. So companies just have to do a much better job of telling people that they're using AI and explaining to them where they're using it in their organization.
I think there's also a positive spin on it, like we were discussing off stage. I've invested in a company called Lightscreen, for example, which automates the coding interviews. I'm sure, how many of you have been through coding interviews? Majority of us, right, who come from the Indian background are software engineers. You have to stand and write code, and there'll be people watching you write code, and then you'll be past judgment. As a young engineer, it was awfully embarrassing for me. I was just very shy and introverted. I can't believe I'm sitting on stage here. It's not the same human being, you know? And you'd have like this old man watching you while you're writing code and passing judgment. So now that whole process can be automated, which means there's this elimination of bias, the discomfort of being watched and observed. Because I think software engineering is a skill by nature, is a very introverted skill. You're not going to be like observed when you're writing code. But also, it eliminates the bias towards the gender identification. I think if you're going to, it's like taking the SATs. It doesn't matter what your gender is. As you are able to increase your skill level, you can get there. And it's only software that's automated can give you that sort of thing. So, what's your perspective on that? Do you think that's going to level the playing field for many of us?
I think a lot of companies have been using that already, and I do think it's fantastic. And I think that you want to be able to show folks that you're going to do a coding exercise, tell people what the coding exercise is. The challenge, as we talked about a little bit, is when you use a coding exercise, not just for an entry-level engineer who's coming out of school, but you use it for a senior engineer who's been a distinguished engineer for years.
Right.
It's important on how you use that, and then also capturing that data to make sure you're seeing what's the best things we're doing here, or what can we be doing better. So I love it, and I think it's really cool because you can do code from around the world. It doesn't just happens to be people in a room. I'd be doing code with someone in Bangalore. So to me, I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, but I hear you on that. I think the human element isn't really removed because you're still evaluating the human being behind the code, especially as you're looking at seniority.
Yes.
Right. That makes sense. And then what about AI replacing the HR function itself? Do you think that you foresee some of that?
Well, it's famously been said by some of the Anthropic, and a lot of folks have said that for instance, and this has been said to me for years, that recruiting, we're going to get you out of recruiting. They've been telling me that there's recruiting can be replaced with AI, and every year we hire more and more recruiters, and we need recruiters. So I think there's some elements where you can. I think, like, for instance, background checks.
Right.
That can be completely eliminated. Scheduling can be eliminated. There's questions that we should have in HR that you go to HR that you might have in Workday that we could explain more. So there is a lot of things that can be done. But I do believe that the best thing about working with companies is working with people. And so you need people at key areas of your company to really engage with your employees. And so if you're a startup company, people I've heard today, people are very happy that they don't have HR, they don't have finance in their organizations. Well, that's great until you get to a certain size. And we talk about scaling, and I've worked at some companies that scale pretty quickly. You need to have HR. You need to have people that understand people on board. So I don't think the HR will be disbanded, but I also think, and I'll say another thing, and we talked about, which is business acumen. Your HR people, your recruiters, your comp folks, your total rewards need to understand the business they're in. And if they don't understand the business they're in, then they're not really helping the organization either.
Those are good points. I think business acumen is winning over a technical mindset, especially as technology innovation can be automated to a large extent. What about upskilling yourself in AI? As it feels like every single morning I wake up and things have changed already underneath my feet. How do you personally stay ahead of it? But also, how do you recommend people of different levels in the organization go and upskill themselves with all this innovation? Is it even necessary, or do you just kind of like say, I'm going to just give up and, hang in there and see what happens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I come from, in college, I majored in philosophy and political science. And so when I ended up recruiting at the time machine learning folks, when I'm recruiting data engineers, I didn't know anything about a relational database. I wasn't sure about open source, the big paper, the Google's big paper. There's a lot of
BigQuery, yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know anything about this. And so I really got up at 5 a.m. every day.
Oh, wow.
And read for 2 hours to try to learn this. And then I would go into Apple trying to find out how to hire these folks. Well, today with ChatGPT, Claude, you can learn very, very quickly. There's just a ton of things you can learn. So more importantly, you can learn not just technology, you can learn other industries very quickly.
Yeah.
And really test that and use that model. So if I was coming into school and I was coming out of college, I would definitely do a lot more research. And I heard that today. Do a lot more research on the companies you're focusing in on. I would look at the revenues, what the revenue is, because really to be powerful in an organization, you need to think about what the global company is thinking about, what their strategy it is, and how to apply that in your everyday work. And I think that's what helps you. And so for me, I would just spend a lot of time learning about the company and learning about the function I was in to help me in the company.
I'd love to raise the conversation we were having off stage on learning methods, right? Reading versus listening, going to conferences. What is your perspective on that? Especially conferences. I was very intrigued by your perspective because I've always resisted beyond networking, but you were talking about how you can learn in conferences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when I went to Amazon, I was hired at Amazon to hire what's called applied scientists, from what's called director all the way to VP. And at Amazon, if anyone's has anyone worked at Amazon before? Good, it's just me, so I can explain it so I don't get in trouble. Amazon doesn't go into any business unless it's a billion-dollar business, and so they require
You mean an
scientists.
industry or a
It does
how
not matter if
interesting.
if it's not researched, they don't go into that business. And so what they do is they hired what's called scientists, applied scientists, PhDs in different areas. And so my job when I came to Amazon was to really interview scientists. And so I was interviewing computational mathematics, I was doing computational linguistics, computational advertising. These are not areas that are my day-to-day areas that I focus in on. And so for me, it was really, really important to understand. So what you do is you had to read a lot, you had to understand a lot. And so what I would say to folks is that all these companies need people who can do this kind of work. You need to be able to be versatile. You need to be able to change your way of working and operating to do this. So I didn't know anything about scientists, but I can tell you right now, when we recruited some of the best scientists from around the world, it was really, really important that I understood what they did and how that could apply to the company. And today, it's made it very easy for me to sit and talk to almost anyone about what they're doing and what they're not doing. So I think that skill is really important, but I think we all have it. So I think we just have to level up on that one.
Level up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the mindset of curiosity somehow and the willingness to be able to go deep and think about a piece of research, which has become much easier. And I am like that too. I love to read. But now Notebook LM is just paradise. You can just
Yes.
feed a white paper into it and gives you a 2-minute podcast, a 6-minute session.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes.
So I think it's a matter of leverage, but also replaces human beings again, right? Because why would you really need a scientist when you could probably just have a less expensive resource like a software engineer, pick up a ton of research and, just munch it. So those models are being changed. You're not at Amazon anymore, but I'm guessing those are completely being transformed, right?
Yeah, I think that's true, but I also think that everyone wants to have a data engineer. Everyone wants a scientist and a science, there's, on paper, a B-2 bomber can't fly, an
Yeah.
aircraft carrier can't float, right? There's an aspect of making sure there's an applied sciences being applied on a day-to-day basis to do these things. So even though we count on Claude and all these different things to help us, I've run some serious things across these things and they were wrong. And I just happen to know they were wrong. But imagine if I didn't know they were wrong, right?
Yeah.
And I just assumed that was right. So your job really is to test that. And that's great about these applications because you can test a model and retest it and test it again. What I love is to test it on previous data, right? So if I'm looking at doing something and I'm looking to recruit engineers focusing on computer vision, right? I want to look at all the data I've collected on computer vision engineers and apply that on future. So it's just a good way to do it. But these guys, these services aren't all. They don't know everything, so you do have to check them.
So you think there's still value in going and getting a technical degree as parents of teenagers? What do you recommend?
Well, my son's in the audience, and I would say yes, it is very important to do that. But I would say yes. I think the way of thinking and the way of operating is really, really important. And so for me, I would think, I was just talking to someone earlier today, and I forgot who, but we both said, boy, I wish I would have got an engineering degree because it just gave me it would give you the foundation, how things were built, how things were organized, and it just gave you that rationale. So I think college is important. It may not be for everyone, but it's a great way to learn how to concentrate and to learn and be curious. And I think it's what we talked about.
Learn to be curious, learning to learn, but also the community, I think. The colleges, the friendships that we built in colleges carry us throughout our lifetime, whether you stay in touch with them or not. I think they're the ones who shape how you make friends. So second aspect is you have worked in amazing companies as an executive recruiter. Everybody wants to be in the echelons of C levels in the publicly traded companies. What does it take to get there? How would you tell our audience to train themselves to get there?
If you want to work at a large company like that, and we talked about this, it's different from a startup to a mid-sized company to one of these, as you call these super scalers, right? And so one of the things that I've always found valuable when at these companies is being able to take feedback,
Yeah.
because you are going to get feedback from everybody and you're going to have to absorb that, move forward with that, and execute. So I think one is getting the feedback, and two is being collaborative. I think collaboration is huge. It's an undervalued trend, but working with other people, sharing what you know, sharing what you don't know, and then finally postmortems. You're going to go into these large companies and you're going to do well, and you're going to go into these large companies and you're going to do poorly, right? What did you learn either way? And I think that's really important to do a postmortem, no matter where you've worked at, to really go back and say, what did I learn here? What did I achieve here? What results did I give here? What could I have done differently? And to the last point you're saying is always get feedback from others.
Yeah.
And these large companies do this very well, where they'll run things out to the employees. What are we doing well? What aren't we doing well?
Yeah.
And take that. So you just have to be able to really accept feedback and be able to consume it and not be negative against it.
Absolutely. I think whether you're in a startup or any stage in your career, that's immensely helpful to have that. One of the tricks that one of my mentors taught me early on is to ask, tell me more.
Yes.
So when someone gives you negative feedback, rather than recoil, which you automatically will do, she said, lean forward and say, tell me more. And the person will keep telling you more, and you keep saying, tell me more, and tell me more, and tell me more, until you get to the end of that story. And in the least, they'd have felt heard, and they'll think that you're amazing, that you're a great listener. And if that's the only thing you've done, it's still worth it. And it's absolutely works every single time. And I get a ton of negative feedback because I'm this aggressive type A crazy woman who's very opinionated and who does whatever the heck I like. And so I get a lot of feedback, and I'm like, tell me more.
But that's important. If people aren't giving you feedback, that means they don't like you. And that's something, when you're young, you get feedback all the time. When you're kids, we have young kids, you're giving them feedback all the time. The older and older you get, the less and less feedback you will get. And so remember, take that. It's valuable. It might be negative, it might be positive, but take that and incorporate it into your
That's
work.
amazing. That's like, this is like marriage counseling, if you ask me. The tip that he's giving you, if your spouse is going silent on you, you're in trouble.
Well, just be quiet and listen. I get a lot of feedback there. I get a lot of feedback there too.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last thing that it's a topic behind, after my heart, is considering my startup background. Like I started my first company when I was 21 and got $1 million in funding. And so that altered my brain. I come from a background where none of the women were allowed to work. All my male ancestors were professors of economics. And here I was, 22 years old, 21 years old. And so I've been more in the startup ecosystem than average. And I always, and I think a lot of youngsters are like that today, who'd rather start a company than go work in a big company. And even as we age, we're always like measuring that, living in Silicon Valley. Should I be doing a startup versus going and being a director of product? Should I be starting a company now versus, even retiring? I've found like
Yep.
they're 60 years old, they're still having this question. What's your take on that? When you're looking at people in their career growth, which you've done almost all your life, how are people measured when they do the switch between startup to big company? And what are some like metrics they're measuring you by?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you're a startup, you've got to be aggressive. You've got to believe in yourself, because you're going against it, being disruptive. Almost no one believes what you believe anyway. So the startup, you're doing that. It's important that you really push hard on that.
Yeah.
But when you start to go to the next level of your career, when you're starting to get to a mid-level, then you have to be incorporative of other people's ideas. You have to bring them along. And then to the last phase of your career is where you're really you're building frameworks around your success. So you're giving deliverables, you have frameworks. So that's really important. I think at the end of the day, I love a startup. And for all those of you that are in a startup that are doing that, the reason it's so powerful and that large companies don't have, it's what's called P&L, profit and loss. You work at a large company and you have a staff of 5,000 people, and an analyst comes and tells you how much money you can spend and how much money you can't spend. You're not responsible for sales. You're not responsible for how things take. In a startup, It ends and it begins with you.
Yeah.
So I think the startup experience is invaluable because when you get to these large areas, you'll have the appreciation for that. So that's the way I would take it.
Yeah, and I think Silicon Valley is a very special place where the cost of risk is the failure is really low, right? And if you start a company, you fail anywhere else in the world, you would not be hireable anymore. Versus here, it's a badge of honor. 3 times company founder, all failures doesn't matter. You're very hireable all of a sudden because you're a risk taker, right? Do you think that's really true, or it just alters your brain that you're like going crazy? I mean, I think people who go through 2 startups need therapy. Like if you're a startup founder more than once,
Yeah.
it's like saying I want to kill myself again and again. And that's
It's
really hard.
It's really hard. You've really got to be able to, you got to have a tough skin. You got to be resilient,
Yeah.
right? You got to be collaborative. But I think by doing that, you learn. And I go back to this postmortem. What did you learn and what didn't you learn and what would you do differently? That's why people want you, because they know you've done some things and you've failed and you've tried things, and those examples are important. I will tell anybody that's doing a resume, write the things that you did at that company, write the things that worked, and then on a side paper, write the things that didn't work or what you learned from.
That's very good feedback. And I know I giggle when I said therapy, but therapy does that for you. And I've seen a therapist because I'm a 3 times product company founder. And that's what they do with you. They basically, executive coaches and therapists make you go and revisit what you've done. So with that, one last statement of wisdom for our audience.
It's happy hour, so really start with white wine and then move to red. Yes.
Yeah, I think keep your sense of humor at all times, right? Life is too short to be taken too seriously. Do improv theater. Get outside. Living in California, it's crazy how many people are just sitting inside and writing
Yes.
code all their lives.
Get in the pool.
I get in the pool every morning.
Get in the pool.
If you have to shower, you may as well go and swim in a swimming pool. And nobody cares how you swim. As long as you're not going to kill yourself in the pool, take some swim lessons. Do whatever it takes, right? So I go riding on Saturday mornings. I take my bike and go. I have 2 sons who won't ride with me because mom is so slow. So I just go by myself. So hopefully you get lots of sunshine in California. And I just really enjoyed talking to you. You're just amazing, full of wisdom, especially on the feedback front.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mala. Thanks so much for having me.
I enjoyed it.
Okay.